Welcome to Thinner Peace and Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. Today is episode number 175, and if you're here to hear the interview with Carol after I coached her from our last session where I coached her before she was a client, this episode is now with her, me interviewing her after she has finished working with me. I think you're going to love it. She is amazing. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. How are you today? It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Oh my gosh, I was at the river today. It was gushing. It was so loud and so beautiful. Butterflies were pulling everywhere. You know, butterflies are my thing. They were everywhere. It was my day to be outside in nature. I loved it. Anyway, today is really special because, as I said in the introduction, I have an interview with one of my clients. And as much as I love interviewing all of my clients, this one is a little special because I actually have our coaching session when she first started working with me. So I coached her on nighttime eating, which was live on the podcast. And that is what I repeated last week. So hopefully you heard number 174, which is Carol being coached by me. We didn't know each other. She had just written me a letter and I just coached her on it. And then after that, she decided to hire me. And now I am interviewing her after she has worked with me. So you get to hear the before, which was number 174. And now you get to hear Carol after. You are going to love this interview. She is amazing. And you know what? This is available to you too. So if this is something that interests you, you know what you need to do. But for now, I want you to enjoy my interview with Carol and know that what is possible for her is possible for you too. Hi, Carol. I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast again.
Hi, thank you. I'm delighted to be here again.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I'll do this when I introduce you in my introduction on my podcast, is that we actually, which is I'm so excited about, because usually when I interview somebody, I always say, oh, I wish I had the first recording when we first spoke with each other. And with you, I actually do.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so I just want to remind everybody that they can go and listen to that interview, and I'll give the specifics in the show notes about what number that is so that they can go back and listen to when I coached you the very first time. We had never met. You had written me a letter and you were talking to me about nighttime eating. So that was probably about, I would say 7 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, it was sometime in, I think, February. Yeah.
In February. Wow. So I guess where I would love to start with you is what made you decide to hire me as a coach as opposed to just listening to my podcast?
I think it was having that mini session, which became the podcast.
Yes.
And I realized that a lot of what you were talking about and what I had listened to on your podcast really resonated with me. And I also felt like I had specific issues for myself that I wanted to work on with you that I felt like I couldn't get out of just listening to the podcast.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think you couldn't get that?
I think it was just every time you would be talking about an issue, sometimes they would be issues that I had and sometimes they weren't. And so while I found all of them really helpful, some were just much more on point than others. And I thought I for me, want to have a concentrated session, on a regular basis, just about me and the issues that I was dealing with.
Okay. So when we did our first, where you had written me a letter and you were talking to me about nighttime eating and how you felt like you just couldn't control yourself at night. And I asked you if you wanted to be coached live, and you said yes. And I think that's what became our mini session, right? Is where
Right.
I coached you live about the nighttime eating. And one of the things that I specifically remember about you is in the end, you called nighttime the danger zone. Do you remember that?
Right. I do. Yeah.
So can
I
you,
used to,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I used to feel that way. I mean, I remember vividly, because it wasn't that long ago, that I would be driving home from work and I would be getting ready for what I knew could turn into a disaster in terms of eating way too much. And so that expectation, I would tense up driving home thinking, okay, now I'm entering the danger zone, because during the day, I hadn't done anything that I considered to be bad in terms of eating. I was usually very, good in my opinion. And then nighttime would hit and I'd have dinner and then I just basically wouldn't stop until bedtime.
You know what? It's so hard for me to even remember that specifically, because when I look at your food journals now and we talk, everything is so different.
Yes.
And so for you, and I think for so many people, why do you think that nighttime was so hard for you? And what specifically were you, because I know it was nighttime eating, but I want you to tell my listeners a little bit about why you decided to hire me. I know you wanted specific coaching, but what you thought your problem was, because you didn't have a lot of weight to lose. So I want you to talk about that, because I know that even though I say maybe it wasn't a lot of weight, for you, it was all the weight in the world, and it could have been 100 pounds as opposed to 10 or 15 pounds. But just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was the reason I wanted help was that I had been on a cycle of doing different diet programs to try to lose weight, and I would get things under control by following a program, whether it was an eating style or a Weight Watchers kind of program, and I would get down to my goal weight, and then I would go back to the old habits of not controlling my portions and eating too much, eating when I wasn't hungry, and I'd get right back to the same place. And I was just sick and tired of doing that. And what you had talked about on your podcast was how you yourself had gone through that kind of a cycle many, many times, getting to the goal weight and then creeping back up and going back down to the goal weight. And I just thought, and you said, you don't have to ever do that again. And that to me was so, the thought of that was so liberating. And I really wanted that. And that's why I wanted to work with you. And I think you had asked me about what was happening at nighttime, why I was doing that.
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, a busy working mom.
Busy, successful, executive mom. Let's just tell everybody how smart and successful you are, right?
Okay. Yes. Successful, busy working mom of 2 kids. And I would come home from work and go from, a very stressful day at work to needing to care for family and pay attention to family. And it's just, in the way I was feeling was I needed to relax when I got home, and I couldn't because I was interacting with family. And so my way of relaxing was to eat. And in my mind at that time, and for so many years, food was relaxation. And it really is not relaxation. It actually is, it causes a lot of stress ultimately when I have eaten too much and then have realized and have felt shame and terrible after eating too much. And it wasn't relaxing. It may have felt that way the minute I was eating something, but I always felt awful afterward.
Gosh, I remember that so much. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me is you still have the same family, right?
Everything's the same.
Everything is the same. And we're not going to cut to the chase because we'll get to the end, but things are very different now, right? In terms of how you eat, how you think and feel when you come home, right?
Yes.
But everything is basically the same.
Yes.
Yes.
The circumstances are the same.
The circumstances are the same. Taught by a true ninja thinker now, because you are a ninja when it comes to your thinking in terms of how you can create your own thinking. And it's also amazing to me that you can always point out to me when you need help. Like you can see that your thinking isn't right and that it's causing you a problem. And so even though, and I want everybody to be aware of this too, is that sometimes even if you're aware of your thinking and you can't change it in the moment, that the awareness is everything. You know what I'm saying when I say that?
Well, yes. I mean, I think we can talk about a recent call that we had
Uh-huh.
that is exactly this, because this isn't like a disease that has a cure, that all of a sudden, once you figure things out, that everything is perfect.
Yes. Good point.
And you do have setbacks.
Yes.
And
Talk about
I
that.
would
Mhm.
I would say that I recently had a setback, and we talked about it, and I thought about why I was doing something that I didn't want to be doing, and it's because of how I was thinking. And I don't know if you want me to get into
Yeah,
that,
why
or
don't you say just a little bit about it? Because I think everybody believes that if they have a setback, that they have failed.
yeah. So I started to, for the first time in many months, I noticed that I was going back to some old behaviors at night
In terms of eating, right?
in terms of eating, like eating after I was full, eating after dinner. And I started to think about, well, why is this happening? It was a couple of nights. And I realized that the old pattern of getting to the goal weight and then rewarding myself for, in my mind, oh, I don't have to worry about this. I'm where I am. I'm in a good place now, so I don't have to be vigilant, and I'm going to just indulge that kind of go party kind of concept.
Like celebrating your weight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And once I realized that, we talked about it, and I stopped it, but the awareness of that, it took me a couple of days to go, oh, wait a minute, what's happening here and why? And we talked about it. And then I realized what I was doing, and then
What you were
stopped it.
thinking.
What I was thinking. Yes. What I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. I love that because you could see that you were going into some old ways of doing and you were trying to realize what the model was that was creating the A line, right?
Yes.
And what we realized with coaching, which is why coaching is so imperative sometimes, is that what you used to do and what I used to do is as soon as I got down to the weight, I decided it was time to have a celebration that I got to the weight by celebrating by eating unconsciously again.
Yeah.
Right. And that's exactly what you were doing, which is, I think, probably a lot of people who are listening can relate to that. And one of the things that I remember about your first interview that I did when I coached you on was you would say, I would go on a diet. It's so funny that it just popped up in my mind right now. You would go on a diet. And as soon as you got down to your goal weight, then you would go back to normal eating.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Right. Yes.
And normal eating to you meant unconscious eating.
Yeah.
Right. As if you were doing yourself a favor by you don't have to pay attention anymore.
Right.
And so it's so interesting that this comes up again because that was like 7 months ago. And that's the way your brain used to relate. It's that the dieting is not normal and the normal is unconscious, which is what you felt was rewarding and allowing yourself to eat whatever you want.
Right. Absolutely right.
So tell me how that has changed for you.
Well, I think what I really focus on now is, why am I having those cravings to keep going or to turn away from myself and eat mindlessly? When I finish eating dinner, and if I have that urge to go into the pantry and start eating when I'm not hungry, why? And I try to stop and feel whatever it is that's creating that urge. And that, I think, is really the key for me to managing my mind and ultimately my weight, because I think this came up in the first time that we talked, but oftentimes that craving comes from a negative emotion.
Yes.
And I really need to stop myself and ask myself, like, what are you feeling and why is this turning into that really strong desire to eat a big bag of salted almonds or whatever it is that I've decided I need to have.
Yes.
And I think sitting with it, stopping and really sitting with it and being aware of it and focusing on it and frankly, sitting through the pain of it, because it's painful to stop yourself and think about it and try to come to terms in your mind with what's causing the craving when you know you've just had a meal and you're full is really the key, I think, for me to changing the way that I think about food and nighttime eating and my behavior and all of that, and changing the way I live.
Yes. And so one of the things that popped up, because even though this was your focus, right, really was the nighttime stuff.
Yeah.
Really what came out in coaching that I just want everybody to see is that when we started doing a mind body chart, which is where we really give you a chart on your mind and your body and your spirit, like all the things that you want to monitor as we start taking sugar and flour out of the diet, we want to see how your body and your mind respond to it, right?
Yeah.
And so we put things like what I put for most people is mood and energy and sleep, which are all the things that we monitored, which for you, your mind body chart went from very low numbers to extremely high numbers that continue to stay that way. It's like everything, according to that mind body chart, which is really a reflection of your life,
Yeah.
has such high numbers. So it's like, yes, you've lost weight. That's on the mind body chart. But there's so many other things that have changed so much that have gotten so much better for you.
Yes.
And two of the things that I ended up asking you if you would put on there was fun, which is an interesting thing to put on a mind body chart, and joy.
Yeah.
And when we started, your joy number was if 5 could be the best, you were at a 1, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then we also put fun on there. And fun is a feeling just like joy is a feeling. That's why we put it on there, because it's a reflection of your mind.
Yeah.
Right. So fun was also A1.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, just to let everybody know, they pretty much stay around 5s. Yes?
Yeah. I mean, everybody, I have ups and downs,
Of course,
but
of course.
I'm certainly not in the one category anymore.
I mean, I would say more than not, when I look at that mind body chart, it's just really high numbers, and they used to be so low.
Yeah.
Okay. And just so everybody knows, you have the same job.
Yep.
You have the same family.
Yeah.
You do the same things.
Yes.
Okay. So what do you think has changed so much to reflect those numbers for you?
It's the way I think now. It's entirely my mind that has changed. It's awareness that I have now about my thoughts, and knowing that my thoughts create feelings. And, it's the model that you talk about.
Yes.
And it really is true that the way you think about something affects how you feel about it, and ultimately will cause whatever the action is that you take.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've been working on the model, and I will say that it's really important. And I think it's the key also to changing your life, because when you realize that you are in control of your thoughts, and that's a huge gift. And it's really, you have to kind of let that sit with you for a second, but you can think about something and feel awful about it, or you can think about something and feel fantastic about it. And that's in your control. And I really hadn't ever thought of things that way.
I know.
So
I know. And so, like, with joy and with fun, do you find that now that you're feeling lighter, because those kind of feelings would make a much lighter feeling in your body, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then do you find that your actions kind of reflect those feelings, that you actually do start doing things that create more fun and that create more joy?
Yes. And I think that's absolutely right. And I know that this is the case because my husband has commented.
Yeah. What has he said?
He said, you're a different person
Oh, my
since you've
gosh.
been talking to Dr. Deb. He credits you with giving me a new outlook, a very positive, happier outlook. And he's really happy about it. So it's true that when you start to look for joy in your life, and it's something that's important to you, and even though you're doing the same things, like, for example, taking your dog for a walk, which I love doing. I always have loved taking my dog for a walk. But to really start focusing on the joyful things about that activity, it becomes so much fun. So, and I do it frequently.
So that's like a perfect example of a circumstance of walking the dog.
Yeah.
And before you would have given that in terms of a number for joy, you would have given it a low number.
Yeah, like a chore, and I've got to do this, and yeah,
That's
he's
the way you
cute,
used to
but
think about it.
yeah, it was a chore. Yeah.
Right. And now what has changed is that you think something differently about it. And so your joy immediately and fun feelings immediately go up because you start thinking about how fun it is and how much you love your dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like it's always available to us and we just don't know it. Right. And it's like with you, for being as smart and successful as you are, that was not available to you.
No.
And now, because of number one, of course, of the coaching, but two, what I have to say about you as a client is two things: your willingness to be vulnerable, to say it like it is, to tell me what's going on inside of you, and also your openness to seeing things differently. And the other thing is that no matter what I asked you to do, you always did it. I mean, not sometimes, always. Can you tell me why?
I think I really wanted to make this change in my life a priority. And so I thought, I've hired somebody to help me change. And so I'm going to do everything that she says to help me do this.
Boy. And you did. And I think for people who are listening, it's not like that what was available to you is not available to anybody that's listening to this. It's just the difference between deciding that you're going to do it no matter what and you're going to get out of your own way. Would you say that that's true? I mean, like, how did you get out of your own way? Like, I mean, did you ever have food journals that you would have preferred not to send to me?
Yeah. And there were definitely things from time to time that I had in my food journal that I was like, ugh, why did I do that? But I also thought of those things always as places where I could learn.
I love that. That's such a high thinking thought, is instead of what did I do wrong or, oh, I'm a mess, to, oh, how can I learn from this?
Yeah. And I do think that one of the things that you have talked about in so many of your podcasts, and you say it every single end of your podcast about self-compassion, is so important, because sometimes I'll do what I don't, what ultimately I don't want to be doing if I give into a craving, for example. And I think self-compassion is really important when you say to yourself, well, why did I do that? And, it's okay. And the self-talk of being compassionate to yourself instead of beating yourself up is so important. And I think that's been really helpful to me too.
Yeah. And so how did you switch that around? Did you switch it? I mean, because you were as hard on yourself as anybody I've ever met.
Yeah.
Right. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
And I would also say that now you're one of the most kindest persons to yourself that I've ever met. And how you go from that. I mean, like, why are you sticking with that?
Well, I think it's a big, complicated question, but I think that because it has worked for me, so I've seen that being compassionate to myself, taking care of myself, taking time for myself, self-care, kind self-talk has, instead of doing what I used to do, which was to scare myself and punish myself for behaviors that I didn't want to engage in, like, nighttime eating, being compassionate and trying to understand why I did what I was doing and being kind to myself had actually helped me. And I started to notice that, I was doing much better. So, and feeling much better and thinking about myself in a better way. So I think self-compassion is so important. And so I think maybe it's seeing results of self-compassion that led me to say, well, this is a good thing for me. I need to keep doing this. I need to keep thinking about myself that way.
So really, it's like if you would look at a model, what the thought was is I need to be kinder to myself, something like that. Or I'm going to work on being kinder to myself, or I'm going to be more curious about what's going on in my life.
Yeah.
Right. And as you change that thought, the feeling you created was self-compassion. In your A line, you talked kinder to yourself and did kinder things for yourself.
Yeah.
And then the result is that you were kinder to yourself and you got more of what you wanted.
Right.
Right. So that's why the model is so important, is because it gives you the results according to your thinking. So if you're trying to create evidence for self-compassion, then if you're thinking self-compassionate thoughts, you will create evidence for it.
Yes, I think that's right.
Isn't that kind of interesting? Like, as I say that to you, I mean, because I just thought about it just now. This is a new revelation to me as I'm talking to you.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and it's like you were the model that you used to have, your old model or your unintentional model was the thought like, is that if I'm not hard on myself, I can't change. Something like that. I'll never change if I'm not hard on myself. If I don't sock it to me, who will? You know, that's like, I remember like growing up, my mom used to say some of the most terrible things to me. Horrible. And then, but she would say to me, but who else would tell you? As if she was doing it out of love for me.
Yeah. Well, I think you had actually said to me, would you ever talk to your child the way that you talk to yourself? and the answer is absolutely not. It was cruel.
Never. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, you know, one other thing that I want to touch on before we end is in the beginning of our sessions, and this just came back to me too. Sadly, your dad was really sick and he passed away while we were working.
Yes.
And do you mind if I talk about this just a little bit?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't mind.
All right. So one of the things that you told me, it was on our first session, and that's why this is ringing a bell to me, is you told me that you couldn't do any food journals. And I asked you why, and you said because you were visiting your dad and you didn't have the time and you really weren't doing what you weren't being good. You weren't being good because you were eating very unconsciously. And so you didn't want to didn't do any food journals and didn't want to write it down. You remember that?
I do. Yeah.
And when we got into that, and because you were willing to look at it, what you found was that instead of feeling better from being unconscious and overeating, it just made you feel you are already sad, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't make you feel any better. It made you feel even worse.
That's true.
Right? Because this was the beginning of our work together, that's what you used to do, is when uncomfortable feelings came up, you would want to use food not to feel them.
Definitely. Yeah.
So you want to just tell us just a little bit about how that changed? Because I think it's so remarkable because you take something like that type of circumstance, which is not easy. And when your mind is used to doing only one thing, which is eating and numbing, you did not do that. And I think it's brilliant of how you came to that. And maybe we're sharing with other people, because probably the first thing that most people will say to me is the reason that I gained all that weight is because this happened.
Yeah.
That could have been you, but it wasn't.
Yeah. The timing of all of this was very interesting.
Yeah, I know.
My dad was dealing with leukemia and dying. And that's when we started working together, and I would go visit him oftentimes when he was in the hospital, and I would go to the hospital cafeteria and just eat whatever gross, like greasy food that they had and just not really think about it. And then we started working together, and I started really focusing on myself and being compassionate toward myself and caring for myself. And I realized that doing that was not being connected to myself and my body, but was actually making me feel worse. And I was already feeling terrible about my dad. Right. So it was just making everything worse. And so when I started to focus on myself and keep my food journals and be mindful of what I was eating and trying to make myself feel better, what made me feel better was eating well and eating healthy foods and not overeating, eating just until I was full. And that actually helped me cope a lot with the grief of losing my dad.
So it helped you. This is what I think you're just saying is that by taking care of yourself, being conscious of your own feelings, which means you were only using food to physically take care of yourself.
Yeah.
It means that you were dealing with your emotions.
Yes.
You were dealing with the grief and the sadness.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the first time you ever did that.
Probably. I would say yes.
Yeah. Over something like that, which is, you can't find a more difficult situation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want to point out to our listeners, and something about you is that you took this work seriously, and that you could have used that as an excuse. Weeks. You could have used that for weeks of not being able to do it. Oh, my dad. Oh, this. Oh, that. I can't do it. It's too hard.
Yeah.
And you did it instead as a way of helping yourself and learning more about yourself. And it's probably maybe the best gift that your dad could have given you.
Yeah. I think so.
Wow. Well, you know what? You are remarkable, and the work that you've done is remarkable. It really is. It's just, as we sit and talk about it, it just reflects in me again about why I like to do this work and why I loved working with you so much.
Thank you. Well, I've grown so much from working with you, and it's interesting how when I started to work with you and when I decided I wanted to hire you, it was all about weight loss, and it's really not about that. And for me anymore, it's about the way I think about things, which ultimately has the nice result of losing weight. But it's really it's a outlook on life that is different, and in a very positive way, and being mindful about things, which is huge for me. It's just an enormous change in the way that I live my life. I feel like I'm not going through life just mindlessly getting from the morning to the evening. I'm much more mindful about things, and I'm enjoying my life more.
And all because you wanted to lose weight.
Yes. Yeah. No, you've been remarkable in my life. I mean, like I said, my husband has noticed a huge change, and it's really made a big impact on me. And that means it's impacted my husband and my family, and also the way I feel in general.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling much better.
Yes.
In the wake of losing my dad, which is really remarkable considering where I could be if we hadn't been working together.
It is. It really is. So let me ask you this one last question.
Yeah.
Why is this the last time that you will ever have to do this again? Lose weight.
Because I've changed the way I think.
Period.
Period.
Right. I mean, you could say it better. It's like, but you really have changed the way you think. And if you can manage your own mind, what you put in your mouth is all secondary, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, it was a pleasure talking to you. You are the reason why I do this work. And I'm glad that I get to continue talking to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you guys, did I tell you? If you listen to the before, when we were talking about her 9-time eating and all of her thoughts, which was episode number 174, and now you listen to her, it almost doesn't sound like the same person. You know, she's a really busy, successful executive. And now her life, I really think, has gone from a 1 to a 10. That's what she would say, especially when we were talking about her mind-body chart, how much more fun she's having in her life, how much more joy she's having in her life, and she's lost weight. But it's like, I think the fun and joy came first, and then I think the weight loss came after. And she is really just thrilled. As she said in the interview, her husband just can't believe the difference in her. And who else would be able to tell the biggest difference in somebody you live with day in and day out? And the other thing that I said when I did my first podcast with her, where I was coaching her, I said at the end of that coaching session, I said that if we decided to work together, not only would she lose weight, but I was hoping that her whole life would get a whole lot better. And you know what? You heard from this interview, her life got a whole lot better. That is the power of my program. And that is the power of coaching, my coaching specifically. So if this is something that you're interested in, I now have an application that you can fill out if you would like to have a consultation with me, or you would like to have a mini session with me to find out more about how you can work with me. All you need to do is go to drdebbutler.com/work with me, and you can apply. And as always, until next week, Carol said it, and I'll say it again. No matter what else you do next week, be very, very, very kind to yourself. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast with my wife, Dr. Deborah. I've enjoyed working with her and living with her. That's right, we work and live together for 40 years, more than 40 years. It's amazing how time flies. And it's been like a little tree growing in the yard, and now it's a big tree, our love. So I would like to invite you to correspond with Dr. Deborah. Go to iTunes, drdebbutler.com/iTunes, and you can review the show, and you can even give some helpful suggestions on what you would like to talk about in the future to accomplish your mindfulness and your journey into mindfulness. Thank you.